Come on, Daniel chapter 3. Daniel chapter 3 is seen as a book of prophecy. Daniel really prophesies more than they can handle because God is waiting for the right time to send redemption through his son. But Daniel is prophesying. Daniel gives great vision to that which is to come. It is a book of revelation. It is a book of God showing himself. Daniel chapter 3, just verses 13 through 18, but I encourage you to read the first 3 chapters that you might get an understanding of these men taken in captivity and understand that they still believe that God was able, even in the midst of captivity. Come on, let me read these words to you. Daniel 3:13, New Living Translation. It says, then Nebuchadnezzar flew into a rage, and he ordered that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought before him. When they were brought in, Nebuchadnezzar said to them, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you refuse to serve my gods or to worship the golden statue I have set up? I will give you one more chance to bow down and worship the statue I've made when you hear the sound of the musical instruments. But if you refuse to bow down, you will be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace. And then what God will be able to rescue you from my power? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you. Boldness and confidence brought on by a familiar relationship with God. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us from your power, your might, your majesty. But even if he doesn't, we want to make it perfectly clear to you, your majesty, that we will never, not now or ever, serve your gods or worship the golden statue you have set up. Amen. You may be seated for a few moments. I struggled, as usual, with how to name or tag this particular subject, this title. I looked at one: principle outweighs preference. Principle outweighs preference. I didn't stay there too long. I went on to a familiar taboo subject or title. You don't look like what you've been through. Now, that's not always true for everybody, because some of y'all look just like the hell you've been through. But some of y'all don't look like what you've been through. I thought about those two. You don't look like what you've been through. Principles outweigh preference. But then I had another one in the midnight hour. It was, but if not. Whatever one you desire to choose for your title is up to you, your prerogative. I'm going to preach the sermon that God has given and allow you to label this the way in which fits your category. You don't look like what you've been through. That is more than external beauty. That's more than a wrinkle-free face. It's more than strength or a youthful look. You don't look like what you've been through was made known some decades ago. What God is really talking about, it was an inward determination and spiritual conviction that kept insanity at bay and the enemy from winning. To me, that's what it means when it says you don't look like what you've been through. It is the spiritual conviction that kept and keeps insanity at bay and the enemy from winning. I have been fighting this spirit of death all week. The enemy has bombarded my spirit, my soul, my mind with death, trying to place fear in the areas of faith to overcome the very presence of God, who has already proven himself to be the sustainer and keeper of life. But the enemy doesn't quit just because you believe. He knows that if he tries one more time, he might get you to succumb. But for those of us who have been around the park 2 or 3 times, many of us realize even now that no matter how long he keeps coming, God keeps sustaining. I want to share, and I don't know how much of the history to share with you, that you might have a clearer understanding of the context in which we pull out the content of the message. You have to understand the context, the environment, the atmosphere of what takes place, how it takes place, when it takes place, and to whom it's taking place with, in order to really appreciate the content, the elements of what is happening while things are going around the mind and the spirit. We find that now that we must understand just for a moment that after the death of King Solomon, who was David's son and the 3rd king of Israel, the one kingdom Israel was split into 2 kingdoms after the death of Solomon. There was an infrastructure, there was a fight, there was feuding between siblings on who should occupy the throne. Here we find the Israel kingdom split into northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. The southern kingdoms comprised of Judah and Benjamin, and the northern kingdom comprised of the 10 other tribes of Israel. Jerusalem was a capital for the southern kingdom, while Samaria was a capital of the northern kingdom. The northern kingdom was conquered by the Assyrians in 722 BC. The Babylonians conquered the remaining southern kingdom, which is Judah and Jerusalem, in 586 BC. The citizens of the southern kingdom, captured by the Babylonians' military force under the leadership of King Nebuchadnezzar, brought the best and brightest back to the kingdom. Y'all stay with me. Here it is, the Israelites who once defeated both the Assyrians and the Babylonians in other physical attacks are now susceptible to being defeated because of their split. The Bible teaches us that a house divided against itself cannot stand. They lost power of unity. They didn't understand that what they had would be much better than what they were going to experience. And they allowed themselves to be brought. Are y'all gonna help me today? Yes. They allowed themselves to be split out of the same boat, out of the same bondage, out of the same ancestry pattern. They now find themselves not needing each other. I'm talking to somebody in the house. A house divided cannot stand. It cannot stand because there's no power in unity. There is no sense of wholeness or synergy. There is no sense of oneness. And we find now that because the northern kingdom had 10 tribes were defeated by the Assyrians, it left the southern tribes vulnerable to the attack of the now Babylonian army named Nebuchadnezzar. You do know Nebuchadnezzar, don't you? I'm just going to break this down for you. Here it is. Nebuchadnezzar brings the most genuine people. He brings the most intellectual, those with high IQ status. Daniel is one of these young boys who represented genius, represented the fullness of strength, physical and mental. David, or Daniel rather, now has such a high IQ that he works his way up the ranks with his intellect, his charisma, but most of all, his faith in God. Stay with me, living in a foreign place, but his God does not change. Here it is now, his faith propels him into leadership in a foreign and strange space. He not only elevates through the power of God, but then he also goes back and he brings Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. He brings them, that we call them Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, but their original names were Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. What we now see is Nebuchadnezzar gets to a place of torment where Daniel interprets his dream. Daniel tells him that your dream represents iron and clay. The head is iron, and the iron represents he who will have dominion over all of the other territories around them. This dream goes to Nebuchadnezzar's head because now he's been told, my head is iron, and I will have dominion over all the territories. That now he gets beside himself, his head swells, he can't really handle the elevation even though he is in position of authority, but he can't handle the elevation or the revelation. He gets to a place that now he wants to establish, y'all help me, he wants to establish a statue that others would honor. Now, this statue was 60 cubits high, which means that this cubit, it was over 98 feet high and 6 cubits wide, which means 98 feet high and 9 feet wide. Y'all stay with me. There's still a history. I told you I'm a little history here. Over 98 feet high and 9 feet wide. This was a massive construction. This took some time. This took effort. And the head of it was gold. It represented him. Y'all stay with me. Don't allow the elevation to make you think you are God. And after Daniel gives his revelation, the king says, whenever you hear the music play, whenever you hear the harp and the string instruments, whenever you hear the flute and the clarinet, whenever you hear what we call the elements, the earth, wind, and fire, whenever you hear them start to play, you must bow down and worship. Stay with me, church. Nebuchadnezzar now has a revelation. He struggled with the interpretation of it. Daniel comes from a foreign land, gives interpretation, gives revelation. Daniel now watches King Nebuchadnezzar erect a statue, an idol in honor of himself. And now when you hear the music, when you hear that which you are familiar with, when you hear that which we will put in place, we want you to bow down and what? Worship. You got to get me. Bow down and worship. Now, these men who were exiled, they were living and forced to submit to a king who did not know or have the same values as they had. Isn't it interesting that you get to work with somebody or for somebody who don't have the same level of class or value that you have? There are moments when you must submit to their authority without losing your essence. Oh, I can work for you, but you can't have my soul. Not only are they in exile, but they are now forced to submit to a king who erects a 98-foot statue, 9-foot wide golden statue. And when you hear the music, when you hear that which tickles your fancy, I then want you to bow down and worship. Y'all stay with me. This narrative is more about resolve than it is about deliverance. I know right there, 20 of y'all said right now, I want to be delivered. I want to be healed. I want this. But we must understand that this narrative is more about resolve than it is about deliverance. We all want deliverance. We all want a new car. We all want to be a millionaire. We all want this. We all want that. But what is your resolve? Come on, help me. Most of us want deliverance and a blessing without resolve. A positive outcome without the benefits of a consistent and courageous process. Resolve, listen, is a strong word that means to be devoted to principle and to be committed to a course of action despite the convenience to shift or assimilate to a more enjoyable level of comfort. I just lost y'all, didn't I? Can I just say that again? Y'all, are y'all with me? Let me say it again. Resolve is a strong word. It means to be devoted to principle, committed to a level or a course of action, despite the convenience to shift, assimilate to a more enjoyable level of comfort. Staying the course with that which at present is uncomfortable, but eventually yields greater harvest or a greater outcome is where God wants you. You can't just leave or pray for deliverance just because the process is uncomfortable. Y'all help me. Galatians 6 verse 9 says, be not weary in, y'all gotta help me today. Be not weary in what? Well-doing, for in due season you shall reap if you faint not. This word is something, y'all, because it's saying, Galatians, that whatever is on you, whatever is attacking you, whatever is bothering you, whatever is irritating you, whatever is interrupting your flow, has the power, listen, has the power to cause you to faint. Okay. I know. I hear you. But this word says that there are some things in this life that will make you want to quit. There are some things in this life that will make you want to faint. There are some things in this life that will make you want to throw in the towel. There are some things in this life that'll make you want to cuss. There are some things in this life that'll make you want to cry. There are some things in this life that can break you down to nothing. There are some things in this life that'll make you wish you were never born. There are some things in this life that'll make you bow your head in frustration and in defeat. But God. Oh, no, okay, I'm just talking to myself. Yo. It is. This resolve is something because it's devoted to principle, not preference. Committed to a course of action despite the inconvenience of the present condition. It is easier to resist temptation. It is easier to resist temporary satisfaction if you have thought through your convictions before the temptation arrives. Okay, y'all get that. Do you know when and where to draw the line? Because if you knew and you knew that God loved you and you could trust God and God could trust you with what he gave you, then if you could do that before the crisis, if you cry with God, okay, y'all help me, okay, it's coming. If it was tough with God, if you were nervous with God, if you had a hard time with God, could you now imagine going through it without God? Okay, let me say it again. Okay, y'all didn't get that. You got God. It was still hard. It made you cry. It broke your heart, almost broke your back. If with God it felt that way, can you imagine what it would feel like without God? Y'all didn't get that? No. Somebody ought to give God a praise. Shout, I'm glad he was with me. You ought to shout, I'm glad he was with me. I can only imagine if life is this hard with God, how challenging it would be without God. If that last condition bent me over and I was walking with God, I wonder what would have happened if I did not walk with God and God did not walk with me. If that last condition gave you a mental breakdown with God, I wonder what it would have done if you had gone through the hell without God. You ought to give God some praise and say, God, I'm glad you are with me. I'm getting to some of my points here because this word lets us know that these four men recognized their strength in a foreign land. And they understood a few things that I want to share with you, because some too often compromise their essential conviction in order to blend in with society. God never called us to blend in. He called us out, not to make us better than, but better off. God didn't put a halo over your head. That's what you have done. God, if you have a halo, it's still crooked. God did not call you to be better than. He called us to be better off. And I submit today, you still and ought not compromise your conviction in order to have some people walk with you or ride with you on your journey. If you need them to ride with you and you have to compromise your conviction, it lets me know who your God really is. Baby, can I just say this? That man ain't worth you taking your life for. That man ain't worth you killing him over somebody else who took your man. Listen, if they can take your man, he wasn't your man in the first place. Okay. If they can take your woman, she wants your woman in the first place, because if she's yours, can't nobody take her. I don't care how tall you are, how big you are, how handsome you are. If God put us together and we are being submitted to God's promise and submitted to one another, I ain't got time to be jealous over who likes my wife or who thinks she cute. No, because God put us in covenant. Y'all gotta stop being some jelly-back. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I'm Peggy. I'm coming, I'm Peggy. Happy birthday, Yvonne. Happy birthday to your cuz. I'm coming, y'all. Here it is. Write this down. You gotta understand the importance of your Christian identity and understand what it means. Write this down. Understand the importance of your Christian identity. There are so many Christians who don't even understand their identity. Know who you are. Your identity is rooted in Christ Jesus, not your job, not your 6 figures. Because at any given time, you can lose your job. At any given time, you can file bankruptcy and lose all your money. At any given time, your car can be in a wreck and be totally lost. At any given time, your house could burn down and be left in rubbish. But your identity in Christ stays intact. Thousands of Jews, listen, these Jews who were captured and deported to Babylon from Jerusalem, it gave them a chance to show their allegiance. In an attempt to change and break their allegiance, alignment, and attitude. Listen, in order to break their allegiance, alignment, and attitude of those who were taken into captivity, Nebuchadnezzar had his chief of staff rename the captives with Babylonian names. It was in hopes that the change of their circumstances, environment, and their identity, their names would disassociate, disconnect, discombobulate, and discourage them from believing in their resolve. If I change your identity, then I strip away your allegiance and your confidence. If I call you out of your name, if I call you by what you are unfamiliar with, and I break your spirit, listen, that just didn't happen in America. It happened in the biblical context. Name changing in those days, and say that in those days, names meant something. Daniel rose up in the ranks in respect and honor because he honored the king's position, but saw God as sovereign. Notice something, that the chiefs of staff renamed these young men. Hananiah name meant the Lord shows grace. His name was changed to Shadrach, tender, soft, or under the power of Aku. Aku was the moon god of Babylon. Babylon's moon god now becomes a name that he gives to Hananiah, Shadrach. Y'all stay with me. Mishael's name meant who is what God is. His name was changed to Meshach, one-dimensional and one who does not represent the wholeness of God, but represents the moon god Aku. Azariah's name meant I was helped by God. Okay, y'all see with me. I was helped by God. His name was changed to Abednego, the God of learning and the God of writing, but not the God of assistance. If you look at this, if the enemy can get you to shift and answer to a different name, if you keep answering to the name that you had before you met God, then the enemy is going to win every battle in your life. You got to know your name and know what God calls you. And even though you have not yet perfected that name, you got to work your way up to that name and live for God and not answer to a name that belittles you. Y'all, I know we live in a world now. I know we live in a world now, but women, you are God's gift. Women, you are God's pride. Women, you are the joy of every man's life. Women, you are the strength of every household. You are not answered to B-I-T-C-H because you are not a B-I-T-C-H. You are a woman of God. You are royalty. You are queen. You are princess. You are somebody. And why would you allow somebody to call you a B-I-T-C-H? You ain't nothing but a common dog. No, you've been through too much and you have withstood too much and you have held us on your shoulder and you have shown us the way and you prayed us through. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm sorry. And some of y'all young women just answer, yeah, that's what you dance and you twerk to B-I-T, you twerking to You know I want to say it. Y'all got to pray for me. Y'all got to pray for me. Y'all got to pray for me. No, you can't answer to that because then when I treat you like a dog, you have no right to get offended because you answered to what I called you. If I cheat on you, if I mess around on you, if I take money from you, then I'm only doing what you answered to. Ask your neighbor, what are you answering to? I gotta go. I got 2 more marital minutes, yo. I gotta go. I got 2 more marital minutes. Do you know you are more than a conqueror? You are women. You are a chosen generation, brothers. You are a royal priesthood. You are God's chosen generation, and you are the reason that Jesus came and died because He cared enough about you. It's not your hips. It's not your lips. It's not your fingertips. It's your spirit. It's you. It's you. Write this down. You got to understand the importance of your consecration. These 3 Hebrew boys, along with Daniel 4, understood their consecration. Just because you take me out of my comfort zone doesn't mean I'm going to change my conviction. Matter of fact, once you take me out of my comfort zone, conviction is all I got. Write this down. Understand the importance of your consecration. being useful and available, whether convenient or inconvenient, setting clear boundaries in order to draw closer to God. Romans 12 verse 2 says, and be not conformed, what? To this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. And y'all stay with me. That you may what? Prove what is that perfect and acceptable will of God. Or simply this way, don't copy the behavior and customs of an inconsistent world, but let God transform you into a person that can handle any situation through his Spirit and through his presence. Then he will learn to know God's will for your life. This is something here. God does provide promise. God does provide a purpose. God does provide provision. God does provide promotion, but that is still not the total picture of who he is. Can I just share? Oh man, I gotta go. Can I just share this last thing with you? Well, next to last. Come on, listen, there is a distinct difference with worshiping God for what he does versus worshiping God for who he is. Come on, y'all. I ain't gonna hold y'all much longer. True worship has nothing to do with the melody of a song or the place that you attend for corporate worship. Real worship is an expression of the heart, the spirit. It can't be forced. Real worship can't be forced. It is through a personal surrendering. Worship doesn't even have to appeal to the flesh. According to Colossians 3:16, singing, instrumental renditions, and even the preaching of the word is not worship. And one of the reasons that many of us aren't getting from God what God desires to give is that we don't enter worship, but we stop at praise. Praise ushers us into God's presence, but it is God's presence that releases the blessing. Come on, y'all. It ushers you into a deeper presence with God. That's why you must understand the difference between worshiping God for what he does and for what or who he is. Because if you keep on living, God's going to tell you no. And the question is, can you and will you still love him and serve him when he tells you no? Think about it. Okay, this is it. Influence or power or position, influence and impact comes with the invoice. I had some work done the other day to my house, and my surround sound, when I moved into the house, I couldn't afford surround sound. But since I married Shelley, I can afford a whole lot more stuff. Since I married her, I can afford surround sound and have put surround sound Sonos in my house. All outside on the deck, I got sound because I married Shelley. You understand, bro? I'm okay. We okay, right? We okay. Okay. But write this down. Influence and impact comes with invoice. After the work was finished, he emailed me my invoice, which means that I did the work. Now it's time to pay. You will enjoy what I've done, but I now send you the price of what it costs you to get what you got. They rose in the ranks, but now they got to pay the invoice. Will you bow down and worship the golden image? That's the invoice. God bless you. Nebuchadnezzar gave you positions in the kingdom, his Babylonian kingdom. Now the invoice is due. Will you bow down and worship the golden image? Church, I got to close. Come on, Donald. Come on, man. You have to know what you're willing to pay back for. When someone does me a favor, I might owe them. But me owing them is still predicated upon how they want me to pay them back. I guess can't give you anything you ask for just because I owe you something. I I said thank you. I got to close, man. This is something I got to get y'all out of here. They knew that God had the power to save them. And they didn't bow down. They risked it all because they loved God and their convictions and their resolve was intact. And when the king heard that they didn't bow down, the king summons them. And the king said, I'm gonna give you one more chance. I'm gonna give you one more chance. You didn't do it yesterday. You didn't bow down yesterday, but now I'm the king. I'm King Nebuchadnezzar, and I gave you your position. I want you to bow down, and I want you to worship me when you hear the instruments play. And these men were so blessed, and they were thankful for their elevation, but they were more thankful for the God who loved them. I'm trying. And so they said, King, we won't do it. And the king's decree was, if you don't bow down, I'll throw you in the fiery furnace. Now, some of y'all misunderstand this. The fiery furnace was not your kitchen stove. The fiery furnace was where they made bricks, and they heated bricks to 600 degrees Fahrenheit. And what happened was when they heat the bricks, they were able to manage it more. The king said, not only will I heat it up 600, but I turn it up 7 times what it usually is. What do you do when the enemy turns up the heat? What do you do when the enemy tells you that not only will I put you in this, but I'm going to turn up the heat. I'm going to make you suffer. I'm going to make it so hot in here that you'll bow down and worship me. You will bend over and tell me you love me because I made it hot and miserable for you. Don't let people change you from God. Don't let their frustration and their misery make you cold and callous. Don't let them make you like them. Don't become like them because they're cruel and mean. Hold your ground and say, God, you love me. It hurts to give and not receive, but I can't be like them. I'm sorry, I gotta go. God, I gotta go. I gotta go. The pathway to some promotion will have you traveling through some fires. The pathway through some promotion will have you traveling through some fires. The last thing, understand the importance of your participation. They told the king, we would not do it. Our God is able to deliver us. But if he doesn't, be it known to you, we will still not bow. Understand the importance of your participation. At some point, you will have to take a stand. How long will you be between two opinions? Staying lukewarm makes one untrustworthy because for the right price, they'll sell you out. You have to take a stand for God who chose you. Don't take a stand just to keep the prestigious position or for the stuff that you enjoy, but take a stand, engage in God's kingdom's agenda. Take a stand because he stood for you. On Calvary, he stood up for you. On Calvary, as they lifted him high upon a wooden cross, he stood up for you. When they stretched him wide, he stood up for you. When they pierced him in the side until blood streamed down, he stood up for you. And when he bowed his head and died, he stood up for you. But now it's time for you to stand up for God. But I'm so thankful that that's not how the story ends, because 3 days later, come on, Jamie, he rose again. And I want you to know the Lord will stand up for you. But are you willing to stand up for him? He's been good to you. He's kept you through exile. He's given you a promotion in a strange land. And God, all he wants is for you to worship him in spirit and in truth. Can you stand up for God who stood up for you? Can you stand up for God who looked beyond your faults and saw your needs? Can you stand up for God who didn't cast you away like everybody else, but he came to your rescue? Can you stand up for God who loves you? Even when death comes, he loves you. Can you stand up? I gotta go. Come on, Minister Jamie. Can you stand on your feet today? Everyone standing quickly. There's so much in this text. And I gotta come back maybe a couple of weeks and share with you again, because when the king threw him in the fiery furnace, those who threw him in, the soldiers who bound him and threw them in, were caught on a blaze themselves. You don't have to keep worrying about how you're gonna pay your enemies back. When your enemies keeps bothering you, God's gonna take care of them. And the same ones who threw them in are the same ones who got burned up. Use your energy. Listen, use your energy to endure your tests. Use your energy to be sustained in your moment of trial. Don't use your energy to get back at them. Let God do that. And God's word says it burned them up, it consumed them. And the king couldn't sleep. Let me tell you something. God's gonna prick and irritate those who are bothering you so much that they won't be able to sleep or rest at night. They're gonna have to get high in order to go to sleep. They're gonna have to drink some more Jim Beam in order to go to sleep, because they touched you, they bothered you. And the Bible says, touch not my anointed and do my prophet no harm. When they bother you, they bother God. The king couldn't sleep, got up, and the king said, wait a minute. Didn't we cast in 3? Weren't they bound? Weren't they gagged? But I see 3 men loose. Matter of fact, 1, 2, 3. I see 4. But didn't we cast in 3? And the 4th one looks like the Son of God. Won't he do it? Won't God do it? Won't God do it? Won't he do it?
Thank you for joining and watching with us today. If this message has impacted your life in any way, we need for you to do a few things. First, please join us every Sunday at 10:30 a.m. on Facebook or YouTube. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Secondly, share this message with your friends, family, coworkers. And lastly, pray about how you could sow a seed into this ministry. That way that we could share this message globally across the world. Your best days are ahead of you. We love you and we miss you being here. Don't forget, you are a walking, talking, breathing, living miracle.